Hi, everybody. Welcome to Worship Pastor Perspective. I'm Troy, your host, and today I want to talk to you about flow in worship, as in, where did the flow go? We all intuitively like to see a worship service have a certain amount of continuity. We want to see it have a certain flow. There's an emotional ebb of the tide that we have, and every church sort of has a rhythm or a liturgy that is typical to the flow of worship. It has to do with the kind of opening song you do and the way the pastor handles his opening, the way he likes to close. Some churches have a lot of variety in the template that they use in the course of programming worship, and some churches are pretty much the same every week, but we all have some sort of accepted flow and liturgy. Maybe you've had this experience. I certainly have it, or I led worship, and you got people to the Holy of Holies. You got to this just wonderful, intimate place with God. It's the place you wanted to get them to the whole service. You spent a lot of energy just prayerfully getting them to that spot, and you finished, and you finished up that set, and you just said, oh, praise God. People were there, their hands are raised, and it was this wonderful outpouring to God, and then the pastor gets up, and he immediately tells jokes about people from Kentucky. And you're like, whoa. Talk about grinding the gears. You went from like first gear to fourth gear all at once. It was a big emotional disconnect. And some pastors are really good and sensitive about handling those transitions from one element to the next, and some of them aren't. Some worship leaders are more sensitive to those things than others. And so I want to give you a real simple tool that could be helpful for you. It's called OCSE, O-C-S-E, O-C-S-E. So it stands for O is for opening, C is for the creative center of the service, S is for the sermon, right, or the teaching, right, and E is for the ending. Now, we all have different kinds of liturgy and different kinds of forms of service, and you have different traditions, and so this isn't going to work always for everybody, but this might give you some handholds you may not have thought about. So O stands for the opening of the service. And in your church culture, perhaps your church is used to opening big, like a big high energy kind of a fun song. Maybe your church likes to start off smaller. Maybe your church starts off with the opening of the service is the announcements, or it's a video announcement, or some other element. And if that's something that's pretty consistent for you, then you just kind of mark in your mind, okay, emotionally, we're going to be here. We're kind of like at a 1 out of 10, we're at like a 5 in the opening, or maybe we're an 8. But you just kind of know when you're programming the service that it's going to be in there's going to be a certain kind of energy that you want to be conscious of. And I think you want to be conscious of the fact that when you're opening a service, people are coming in from the parking lot. People are coming in from checking their kids in and being maybe stressed out, or maybe they just got coffee and they're just not there. And so we want to respect the journey of the worshiper as well, and maybe not expect too much of them up front, especially if your culture isn't used to that. So I like to say, let's not act like they're at the Holy of Holies when they just walked in from the parking lot. So give them some time. They may need to be taken along on this journey that we're talking about. So the opening is very specific. C stands for creative center. And that doesn't mean that the sermon isn't creative. Sometimes the creative sermon or the creative center might be in the middle of the sermon. Maybe your pastor is open to breaking up his sermon into a couple of maybe 2 or 3 different blocks, and you might be able to insert different elements in between those. It could be a dance, it could be a song, it could be some sort of dramatic element, it could be a liturgical element of some kind, like maybe the creative center for a particular service is going to be communion, or maybe you do communion every week and that's something that you already can anticipate. But you're going to find somewhere in the flow of the service there's the creative center, and that's that place you're trying to lead people to. It might be high energy, it might be low energy, but it's that sort of creative center that you're trying to, if they're going to walk away with any moment out of the worship service today, I want them to get this. And maybe that's your revelation song. Maybe that's your reflective, intimate, quiet moment. Maybe it's something else. But want to figure out where that creative center is in the service and just kind of mark where that is. And then typically we almost always have a sermon. There's a teaching of some kind, and it's going to have X amount of length. Maybe it's going to be 20 minutes, maybe it's going to be 50 minutes, depending on your tradition. And you know the pastor is probably going to open up his message in a certain way and end in a certain way. Most teachers have a tendency to be sort of in the same sort of emotional place on the front and the back end. So you just need to respect that and understand that that's the way he is. Now, some pastors are willing to be flexible with those things. Some pastors are always going to tell a joke right in the front. And so you know that going into it. And E is the ending. So what is the last thing people are walking away with at the end of the service? And emotionally, where is that? Spiritually, where is that? Is there an altar call? Is there an invitation? Is there a quiet time? Do you would like to send them out just kind of with a kick in the pants and with more energy? Maybe there's some other kind of punctuation mark you want to leave them with on that service. So you have OCSE, opening, creative center, sermon, and ending. And the creative center and the sermon might be able to swap places there. Maybe your creative center is after the message or mid-message or in some other place. But the point of that is, if you can acknowledge what those things are, then you can build your programming around those moments. So if you know the creative center is going to be an intimate moment, then you got to get them from wherever your opening is to that intimate moment. If you know the pastor is going to tell a joke at the beginning of the message, then you want to maybe build some energy towards the end of the set so you can hand it off to him without too great of a change in energy. So the transitions are what we're talking about. Transitions between your opening, the journey to the creative center, the journey from the creative center to where the pastor is, the sermon, and then from the pastor to the ending. Or if vice versa, sermon to the creative center to the ending. And you need to think about those transitions, that emotional journey. What we don't want to do is grind the gears, right? You don't want to go from first to fourth gear all at once, right? You don't want to go from Holy of Holies to joke about Kentucky in a short amount of time. It takes a little time to get there. We want to give people a little bit more of a flow. So hopefully that helps you to think about these things with some handholds. Opening, creative center, sermon, and ending. Think about where the handoffs are. Think about the transitions, and perhaps learn how to build not just an emotional flow from one element to the other, but a lyrical flow from one element to the other. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys today. If you want to ask any more questions about that, let me know in the notes below. I would love to hear from you. If you've got any thoughts on future editions of Worship Pastor Perspective, I would love to hear those too. Thank you so much for watching. As you go and lead worship, lead people on that journey to the Holy of Holies, where they get to meet with God, where they get to enjoy His felt presence as a community. Lead them into that moment and lead them out of that well, with thoughtfulness and consideration to their journey as a worshiper. God bless you guys. I'll talk to you next time.